So privacy is kind of an important thing when we think about the internet and platforms that get created. I've been doing a lot of thinking about this recently in order to understand people's positions on this issue. And I've created a platform that enables better privacy for apps and services on the internet and facilitates an economic model that would enable better privacy within apps. However, the platform that I've created also provides micropayments, and that's the monetization model by which we can achieve better privacy. In short, people need to pay and become the customers of services that they use in order to get better privacy. Whereas if they don't pay, they get served ads and they are the product rather than the customer. Specifically, their attention is the product, and the real customer is the person who is advertising on a platform like Facebook, Google, or others, where where users get things for free. So, in order to consider privacy in its entirety, we must consider the economic component of privacy and the incentives of platforms that are created that try to protect it. We must convince the market and users that they should be willing to engage with platforms that protect their privacy, even when those platforms aren't 100% free, like some of the platforms we're used to in today's world. When platforms incorporate micropayments in order to facilitate better privacy, then they enable a monetization strategy that allows their business model to succeed without selling user data, and thus users can be put back in control and be made customers again in the exchange. However, in order for this to work, users need to understand the micropayment economics that govern these platforms, at least at some level. They should understand why they're being asked to pay to use something that they could otherwise get for free and the benefits that they would get out of doing that. What this comes down to is users acting in their short-term interest versus acting in their long-term interest. When users act in their short-term interest, they, for example, could watch hours of videos on a platform like YouTube or engage with content that gives them dopamine via things like TikTok. And this is no different than the traditional things that have happened throughout history with drugs and other addictive behaviors. People engage in addictive behavior as they engage with these platforms and essentially serve their very short-term biological interest of just getting dopamine from using these platforms. But that isn't related to privacy, you might think. Privacy comes from, we know what privacy is, right? But privacy is more related to long-term interests and things that users might need to consider over the course of, say, a decade or longer versus something that they might get within the next 30 seconds or 5 minutes of engaging on a platform. So we have to consider the actual benefits that users get from these things, and then we have to ask ourselves, how can we educate people and convince them that they should serve their long-term interests at the expense of their short-term desires, biological desires that you have when you're addicted to these platforms, and what are the benefits? So there are many benefits to privacy, but most of them are definitely not short-term benefits. I made a list of a few of them, and I think that at the top of the list would be like personal autonomy. So people have the ability to make decisions that aren't interfered with by others around them, and that happens when you have greater privacy. When your decisions are when your activities are public, your decisions can be coerced by outside groups, and thus you don't have as much freedom to make the decisions that you might like to make over the long term, because now your activities are available for everyone who might seek to control behavior to exploit. So what I mean by this is people in the world will generate, for example, large amounts of data if they're using the internet and not acting privately. and that data can then be used to control populations and coerce, consent for certain decisions that might get foisted upon all of us, even though it's not what we might really want. Having greater privacy enables greater personal autonomy. So the next thing on this list, I think, would be like dignity and respect. So privacy is essential for maintaining dignity and respect, because when individuals are constantly monitored or surveilled, it can often feel like they are being treated more as like objects or spectacles to look at. And so having greater privacy allows people to have more dignity and respect for themselves when they know that the world isn't watching them as if they were an exhibit in a cage, like at a zoo or something like that. You can also have greater personal safety with privacy because, of course, when your information is public, it's possible for bad actors to gain access to it and use it to cause harm to you or to those you care about. And this emerges over time. If you live a life where you leave all of your data in public places over the course of decades, people can actually get to know you more than you know yourself in certain instances, and they can use that to harm your personal safety or the personal safety of those around you in the very long term. Another thing is initiative and creativity. So privacy can be essential for innovation and creativity and things like that, thinking of new ideas, because when individuals feel that their ideas are protected and won't be stolen or exploited by the public, then they're more likely to take the risks and make the investments necessary to develop innovative products and basically be revolutionary or think of the next new big thing. So if we want innovative and creative people in our societies, if we want to keep things new and interesting versus just going along with what has existed for a long time, if we want disruptive things to happen, if we're not content with the status quo, then those people are going to be more likely to make the investments and take the risks necessary to perpetuate their new ideas if they don't think that the world is going to just spy on them or take their creations and not let them benefit from them. So I think that's definitely one of the big ones for me. And then lastly, just simply politics, basically. So democracy and civil liberties, right? So privacy is important for democracy and civil liberties because without privacy, individuals would probably be afraid to speak out and express their opinions, which can obviously lead to a lack of political engagement. So that would allow society to deviate and diverge and eventually lose altogether democratic values that it has over the long term. And so the reoccurring theme across these 5 areas, so the list that I went through was personal autonomy, dignity and respect, personal safety, innovation and creativity, and then basically politics and civil liberties and stuff. The recurring theme is that these things are long-term interests that people should have. And so when we think about why should people value privacy, why should they be willing to pay for the services they use, why should they be the customer instead of the product in the capitalist system in which we exist, it's because over the long term it puts them in control and their interests are the ones that get served. Whereas in the short term, you may get your dopamine hits, or it may feel good to watch videos on these platforms and just to be a product and have your attention sold to people who want to buy it and bid for it. Over the long term, I don't think that's going to be the best approach, and I think that the arguments that I've made here support that. So how do we convince people to serve their long-term interest versus their short-term interest? How do we convince people to understand that privacy is a valuable thing over the long term by employing critical thinking in order to come to that conclusion? Well, that's a problem for education. And back to number 5 on that list, right? Politics. And and just understanding that individuals need to be able to think critically, and they need to be able to make decisions that are going to work well for them in the long term. So those are really the reasons why I think if we're going to succeed, we're going to be able to succeed by convincing people, and by we, I mean the initiatives that I've started around improving digital privacy and enabling platforms that facilitate better privacy and the economics that support that. I think that those initiatives are going to be able to succeed if we can convince people that they should serve their long-term interests, if they can be educated enough to critically think and to understand the benefits that will accrue to them and to their families and to the future, if they value these things. And I think that if we don't succeed, it's going to be because people are too focused on the short term, they're too addicted to these platforms, and that would really be an unfortunate thing. So my call to action to you is to get people around you to realize the long-term benefits to privacy. Teach your children to think critically. Teach those around you to, just to, have discussions with people, right? Engage with the members of your community that you care about, if you care about these issues, and if you think that the long term is something worth investing in. If you think the future is something that we could potentially maybe not just be fatalistic about. So those are my thoughts on this issue. I just wanted to underlie some of the premises on which my systems and platforms operate, privacy being, I would say, the big one, and really explain the necessity for education and civil discourse and the value of thinking long term for yourselves, but also for the people that are going to come after you. Thank you for watching.